live online. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the Chosen Aftershow, The Wedding Gift. My name is Lance Marshall. I am here with my colleague, my co-studier, my co-student of all things television and Bible, Reverend Dr. Zhenya Gurina-Rodriguez. We come to you from the First United Methodist Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. But where we really come to you is from our own homes, where we study the Chosen every week. We decode the texts. We unlock the earthen scrolls. We dive into the deepest secrets of the show and pull out from it nuggets and pearls that we can use for our life and discipleship in Tarrant County in 2020. Thank you to all of you who have joined us today to be a part of the show. I'm so thankful you're here. Zhenya, are you ready?
I am ready. Bring it on.
You're ready. You've already started with the caveat that in a few minutes, your husband's going to come home. The dogs are going to go crazy.
Yes.
We fit this show into real life. So last week, my wife didn't have any feedback because I watched it at 5 a.m. We are regular people doing this the regular way. I'm so glad that you are here. We already have 20 of you watching online. Welcome. I am so glad. Zhenya,
Yes.
before we start,
Yes.
we have to recap. We have to review what happens. We have to, like we're going to a wedding in Cana, we have to walk down the road and recap the episode. Let's recap what happened. Episode 5, The Wedding Gift. The episode opens almost 20 years in the past, where a desperate young mother named Mary is looking for her son, Jesus, who was not in the caravan with all of the rest of them headed back home from Jerusalem after the Passover feast. It's been 3 days. Zhenya, that's suspect mothering. Off to the top, 3 days. I know he's a teenager, but come on. She finally finds Jesus and her husband, Joseph. I was with my father, Jesus says, as Mary's eyes rise past Joseph to gaze upon the temple. He was teaching the rabbis and scholars, Joseph said. They barely let us leave. It's too early for all this, Mary says. If not now, when? Jesus says. Back in our main timeline in the next scene, preparations are underway for a wedding in the village of Cana. The groom's mother, Dina, is thrilled to see her close friend Mary has arrived to help her prep for the occasion. That is a good friend. I'm here to sweep before your wedding. In a nearby prison, the Pharisee Nicodemus continues to question John the Baptizer. He wants to get to the bottom of the miracle he witnessed in the healing of Lilith. The men see the world differently and are deeply conflicted. But Nicodemus can't help but admit he senses something greater is at hand. Reluctantly, he begins to tell John everything. Simon's wife, Eden, is back at their home making some wine the old-fashioned Lucille Ball way. Simon tells her of his encounter with the Messiah and his invitation to leave and follow Jesus. Despite the enormity of this revelation and request, Eden is beyond supportive. She is thrilled to see the spark of faith returning to Simon's life. Also preparing for the wedding feast are Thomas and Rama, the caterers, I guess?
Yeah.
Who will provide the food and drink for the party. In the midst of the packing, Thomas is afraid they haven't packed enough wine. Foreshadowing! The conversation reveals that Thomas has a personality that requires lots of checking and verification. Foreshadowing! As Dina and Mary discuss the upcoming wedding, it's clear there is tension between Dina's family and their future in-laws, who are much wealthier and higher class. Dina is deeply concerned about being seen as worthy in their eyes. As Simon and Andrew walk on the road to meet up with Jesus, they are joined by fellow students who will be traveling with them. First stop, Jesus says, a wedding in Cana. It's time to party. Jesus wants to use this opportunity to announce who Jesus is, but Jesus says it is not his special day yet. Fretting over wedding details, Dina has a terrible encounter with her daughter-in-law's mother, Hila. Hila is cold and judgy, and things are definitely off to a bad start. In later conversations, Dina continues to reference her anxiety about their families getting along. Of particular concern for her is the quality of the wine that they could barely afford to provide. Foreshadowing! Back in the jail, Nicodemus's account of Lilith's healing fills John with excitement. If this healing has happened, public signs cannot be far off, he says. Who? Asks Nicodemus. God's son, John says. which Nicodemus considers to be blasphemy. But is it? All your life you've been asleep, John says. Make straight the way for the king who has come to awaken the earth. But some will not want to awaken. They are in love with the dark. As the wedding rages on, people are dancing, singing, and drinking too quickly. The wine has run out, which risks disgracing poor Dina and her husband Rafi as insufficient hosts who have failed to provide for their guests. Simon and the fellow disciples, meanwhile, are sharing their stories and their history with how they met Jesus, realizing that his previous miracles have been private. He said he's not yet ready to go public with his ministry. Foreshadowing. Worrying for her friend's reputation, Mary asks Jesus to fix the wine shortage. He says his time has not yet come. If not now, when? She says to him. Please. Jesus has the servants fill amphora with water, and you all know what happens next. Praying and touching the jars, they are now full with wine that the dinner master calls the best he has ever tasted. Thomas, the skeptic, is dumbstruck and later reveals to Rama that Jesus has invited Thomas to follow him as well. The party continues, but it is Jesus's work that has only just begun. Dun, dun, dun. Episode 5, the wedding gift. The first thing we do is we ask ourselves, it's been a while since we've seen the show. We've reflected, we've digested, we've eaten, we've slept. When we look back on this episode, Zhenya, what is the first thing that sticks out in our brains? What's the first thing that sticks out to you?
I love the conversation between Mary and Dina about Jesus. When Dina is trying to find out the details of what is going on with him, and Mary has this line, well, Jesus is not working. He has a calling. And the face expression of Dina is priceless. It's like, oh yeah, right, yeah.
Oh yeah. What is it? His poetry? Is that his calling? I'm sure that's it.
Oh yeah, he's a musician living in the parents' basement kind of a thing. And then she switches and says, well, but he's handsome. It's almost like something must be there. Like there should be some hope. I love it.
When I think back on the first thing that sticks out, and it was cracking my wife and I up when we were watching this episode, is the master of ceremonies or the master of drink or whatever you call basically the person who was running all the logistics of the wedding. Oh, he took the sip and then immediately goes, stop, everybody, stop everything. I cannot tell you how not crappy this wine is. Like, this is incredible. This is the most not crappy wine I've ever had in my entire life. It's amazing. The idea that you would just like everyone be silent. This wine is really good. It's such a sophomore in college thing to do. That cracked me up so much. I loved it. So when we are going through the story, we know these stories well. This is in the Bible. We know this miracle. We've read it 1,000 times, and yet the story of this episode still has something in it that's to comprise us. Every single week, we're on the lookout for what peeks out of the grass, what grabs our attention, what surprises us when we're watching the show. My something surprising are a number of things that really stuck out to me. I want to start on this segment. The first was the conversation that was happening between Simon and Andrew as they're walking and talking on the way to go catch up with Jesus. I've never imagined what that situation was like before for two people. And I love how they didn't have doubt at all. Doubt wasn't a part of their mind, which is probably how I would have written the scene if I was writing it. They're 100% committed. What they're focusing on is like, should we pack a lunch? Like, is that necessary? Like, I'm afraid I'm going to do it wrong. I'm afraid I'm going to let him down. Like, that was just so human and so real for them to have that kind of relationship and the discussion of it. Like, what's it going to be like? What are we going to be doing? Zhenya, what is it going to be like when we follow the Messiah?
I don't know.
Are we going to
pack my lunch? Like I pack lunches.
You're ready with the lunch. Yeah. I'll bring a stick to tie it around. That was a little American cartoony, the idea that he would have a bindle. That might be in my nitpicking coming up a little bit later. I just really related with the idea of, so what does being a traveling disciple of the Messiah look like? We don't know. I just thought that was really human. And we forget, I think it's so easy for us to, maybe you're not as guilty of this as I am, Zhenya, but we read the Gospels and we read the beginning knowing how it ends.
Yeah.
We
All the time.
we read Simon Peter and we know, like, by the way, he's not even called, we read Simon, but we know that he's Peter eventually, and we know what Peter goes on to be, and we know his what happens, and then we know he's we know all this. We just forget to be in the moment, and we forget that the story unfolds for them, because so many of us hear the story beginning with the end. So I'm really enjoying how this show is helping us lead in these characters as they're unfolding in their understanding. That was my first thing that was surprising. The second thing along those lines was that Mary was traveling with the disciples.
Yeah.
I know. Hold on. I mean, come on. I mean, I was afraid.
She was absolutely. Go ahead. Okay. Sorry.
Let's just say I was surprised to see it.
Okay, let's leave it at that.
I was surprised to see it, and I'll keep it as a positive. And then the last thing that I loved was when Dina and Mary are looking at the chuppah before they've decorated it, and it's not very good. And Mary's like, "Let me take care of this for you." Like, I'm gonna go talk to my guy. Like, I'm not okay with this. I just love, like, everyone in their life needs the friend who sticks up for you and is like, "That's bull. I'm gonna go get this fixed. Like, this is not the table that we requested at this restaurant. I'm gonna go get this fixed. Like, this is not the hotel room that we were supposed to get. I'm gonna get this fixed." I've never thought of Jesus's mom as being that kind of person. Mary's always just kind of like frozen. I've never thought of her as being like, "That chuppah ain't straight. I'm gonna go get this fixed." And
I know the guy. I know how to talk to him.
Yeah, I know how to get this. They're trying to push you around on chuppah deals. That's not how it's gonna work. This is Bush League. This is Cana. We don't settle for this. I'm gonna go talk to him. I know a guy. I know his mama. Like, I'm gonna go get this done. I love that. Zhenya, what surprised you? What stuck out as surprising for you when you watched the episode?
Well, yeah, Mary traveling with a bunch of dudes. I'm all for, Mary being one of the disciples. She's the head of the herd there. She's chosen before anybody else is chosen.
Right.
Yeah, but the woman traveling with a bunch of guys, like, if that kind of concerns you, like, multiply it like 1,000 times, that would be the reaction in the ancient world to a woman traveling with a bunch of guys to a wedding in an undisclosed location somewhere in Cana. So
no, hold on. Let's unpack that a little bit, because is that just because of the obvious logistical safety concerns? Or is that more of like the religio-cultural expectations of what is proper and okay? Is because they wouldn't want her, they wouldn't consider her worthy? Where's the real tension there, you think?
So that would be extremely dishonorable for her to be in the company of men without her brother, father, husband being present to protect her honor. Mm-hmm. So even if nothing happens, if anyone would see her in a company like that, she would be forever labeled as a dishonorable, shameful woman. So if historical Mary actually did it, she was really brave to stand against cultural expectations of what women's behavior should be like.
Yeah, that would be a hard river to cross. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that would definitely be a reputation that would go with her for forever and ever and ever. Which we do have a lot of, traditions where Mary Magdalene is a prostitute, even though it's not in the Bible. So maybe that's how the writers of the show are playing with it, because that would be quite scandalous. Even like, so.
Yeah, I think my impression is the writers of the show are, and I don't mean this in any way as a criticism, but they're just saying, hey, we think the message for the modern audience is this is who Jesus is and this is what Jesus does. And we're not going to try to speak through all those lenses of historical concern. Like, that would be too disorienting to a modern audience. And so we're just going to kind of wrap it in. It's not, I'll give them a huge benefit of the doubt and say it's not because they're ignorant of those aspects, but maybe they're just trying to communicate something a little bit different.
And saying something in favor of that is, and I will dig into it a little bit later in the conversation, but women were among the traveling followers of Jesus. And this is not something that we normally see in Jesus movies. It's usually Jesus and 12 dudes behind him.
Yeah.
So putting that up front is refreshing and kind of makes us like remember that, oh yeah, there are like women that have names, that have stories, that I am among the followers of Jesus that literally follow him through Galilee to Jerusalem. So they were walking on those roads and traveling with Jesus, but just seeing her alone in that company.
Yeah, it's a little hard. Even like Wild West, that wouldn't happen. It's interesting to see that like this show is 1,000 times more, gives more visibility to women in the role of the gospel stories than the majority of Christian media does.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in doing so runs up against the actual historical accuracy of women in the ancient times. Like it's so
definitely there is a tension, but I enjoy watching it. But when there's that shot on the screen, they're walking, I'm like, whoa, no way.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something that's surprising. That's something that sticks out. Obviously, we can dig on that for a while.
I have one more. One more.
Yeah.
I love how the show fills in some of the details of how the disciples meet with Jesus. And I forgot which disciple met Jesus at the construction of the bathroom.
Yeah.
Who was that? I forgot.
Was it Little James?
Maybe it was Little
I can't remember
James.
which one, yeah.
But I love how he's like, oh yeah, and Jesus was building, this ADA approved ramp for the handicap or for whatever, disabled or limited ability.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is such a Jesus-y thing to do. You're like 21 centuries ahead of your time. They're building a ramp.
Elizabeth pointed out he had to be doing the most thoughtful and generous thing possible, which is building a ramp for the mobility impaired. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. That's right. That's the word. Yeah.
That's Jesus. He's the guy who goes and builds the ramp on the mission trip. I mean,
and he knows the past and the future, so he knows we will get to the point in history where we know ramps are important. So
2,100 years ahead of us. Yeah. Okay. So sometimes when you're watching the show, a little bit of context helps. Sometimes you need to rely on your friends in Zoom, Lance and Zhenya, to help explain a couple things so you can pull out some greater meaning from the show. We call this things to know to help you pull out. Zhenya, what are your things to know for this episode?
Okay, so for all the nerdy people who noticed that when Jesus is lost, the show says that he's 12 years old.
Right.
And then the date on that event is year 8 AD. Okay. So what the heck?
Well, we're going deep.
Hold on, the dogs are barking. I have to let them out.
All right. While Zhenya is doing that, everyone get your abacus out, sharpen your pencil, get your slide rule. We're doing some date work here.
Yeah. So according to the show, Jesus was born in year 4 BC. And that is actually where most of the historians land right now. And here's how this calculation goes on. In Luke 2, we read that there was a census happening, and that's why pregnant Mary was on the donkey.
Right.
So there is a mentioning of that census of Quirinius by historian Josephus, but it happened in year 6 after Jesus was born, so 6 AD.
Okay, 10 years later.
So the census detail kind of doesn't help us. The problem also with that is that by the time that census happened, King Herod already died. But we need him to kill the babies, to cut the head off the creepy John.
Yes.
So we still need Herod. Yeah. So most of the historians go by the... so Herod dies in year 4 BC. So people kind of place the birth of Jesus anywhere between 6 to 4 BC. Mm-hmm. And that is what the show did. That's why Jesus is 12 on the year 8.
All right.
Yeah, so disregard the census, is not helpful, doesn't line up. Go by Herod, because we need Herod alive for some time.
All right. So That is the most PhD things to know. That is biblical scholarship right there. I mean, that is
Next time for Christmas, you can share these details with people. Isn't that exciting?
It's so exciting. You're doing Christmas Eve next year. So my things to know, I want to talk a little bit about what Simon and Andrew allude to a couple times in the episode. They're a little heavy-handed with it, so it may be pretty obvious, but they make allusions to how it is that Jesus teaches. And so he hasn't begun to do a whole bunch of it with the disciples. And Zhenya and I are choosing to not watch ahead in episodes, so we don't know exactly what's coming next. We've only watched as much this. By the way, Julie just pointed out, thank you, Zhenya. That was a question that I had. So you nailed it.
Welcome.
So one of the things that Jesus does in his teaching is he does this model where he does something, then he debriefs with his disciples and his apostles. He does something, then he talks about what he did, he explains it. He then sends them out. He sends them out first 12, then 72. Then they come back and he debriefs, teaches some more, and then he ultimately empowers them to go and do. So this model of Jesus's teaching is observe me while I do, talk about what happened, you try, talk about what happened, and then ultimately you're empowered to go and teach. That Jesus's model for teaching. So Simon and Andrew alluded to that when they came to their father and fishing. What are we doing? It seems like we're just watching him fish. No, we're learning how it is that we do this. That's how we were turned into fishermen. And so, but Jesus's model isn't just watch me, it's watch, I'm going to talk and explain, see, I'm going to explain, now you try. And so I'm hoping the show has some elements of that in it. We'll see as it goes on. But as far as things to know goes, one, that's Jesus's model for teaching. Also, if you're in a position as an educator, as a parent, as someone who's trying to teach someone how to build a latrine with a ramp with 2,000-year-old technology, those are excellent models for teaching. The kind of watch me, let's talk about it, you try, let's talk about it, you go and do. So that's a thing to know about how it is. So, but that's just what we think. Zhenya, what we think doesn't matter. That's not what people want to know. That's not why they tune in. They want to know what our spouses thought. They want to know what your husband Edwin thought. They want to know what my wife Elizabeth thought. They're frustrated they're not on the call right now. They want to know what they think, not what we think. Zhenya, what did Edwin think? Episode 5. What is Edwin up to? What's he thinking?
So his observation skills were extremely, on top of the game this time.
Yeah.
So his comment was, Simon is really jacked.
Simon's buff. Simon's in good shape. Yeah, he better be. Those nets were heavy when they were empty.
I know.
But it's a lean buff. I mean, it's a cardio. I mean, it's high reps, low weight.
In good shape, yeah. But that cut-off muscle shirt on Simon really showed up his physique.
I'm thinking about getting one and just calling it biblical.
Yeah, wear a tunic.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just getting a tunic. I also noticed if you go back and watch the scene with Simon and Andrew walking next to each other, they gave Simon the shorty tunic. He's got short shorts. They look like 1970s jogging shorts. He got the short tunic. So I happened to notice that on the thing. So Elizabeth did not watch last episode. She was asleep. It was 5:00 in the morning. So she saw this one though. Zhenya, she had a problem. She had an issue. And she had an issue that was immediate and that was pronounced and that threw her off for the rest of the episode. And that is Simon comes home. He tells his wife, I've seen the Messiah.
Hello.
And I'm leaving. And her response is, great. To which Elizabeth gave 2 thumbs down, double raspberry. That did not pass her smell test at all. This is a blue collar fisherman's wife in the middle of nowhere who relies on the catch to survive. And her response is, you met a stranger by the lake and now you're throwing away your livelihood and everything else to do who knows what. Elizabeth's biblical hypothesis is that her response would have been something other than complete and total affirmation. But she gave it with a really good, and she gave a really good point. She said, from our own limited experience of just, which is in nowhere near the difficulties that they faced, but life in ministry is tough. Life as a ministry of a spouse of someone is ministry and tough. And there's something beautiful about that wrestle and that journey and that struggle of commitment and growth. And they just passed over it with, hey, I'm really happy for you. I did love the line of someone sees in you what I see in you. I love that. That's a wonderful spouse thing to say. But for her whole, like, I don't care. Who cares what the consequences of you leaving me alone, et cetera, et cetera. Elizabeth had major concerns with that.
Oh no, she's right. I mean, yeah.
That's probably because about every 48 hours I come home and I'm like, Elizabeth, I'm going to play electric guitar for a living. I've decided I'm changing everything. I'm going to be a rock star. You know what? I changed it again. I'm going to the Olympics. I've changed my goal. That's probably why. She's just over it with me doing it. Yeah, she had major concerns.
Have you tried the comedian one? Maybe she'll be on board with that.
Is it working? You tell me. Did you pay for this? This work out well? Yeah, I don't think so. So we've been positive. We've been supporting. We've been at the same time, we've been pointing out some things that we're a little curious about. We've got some questions about. Now it's time for our premier segment, the cream of the crop. It's what everybody comes for. They start saying, Zhenya, Zhenya, Zhenya. Because this segment is nitpicking. It's where we watch the show and we go, no, show. I don't think so. And you're the star of nitpicking, Zhenya. This is your stage. You're ready.
Okay.
What stuck out to you this week? What do you have to comment on?
So the infamous or famous crooked chuppah.
Yeah.
During the wedding. It's all great. You know, it actually represents the tent of Abraham that was open to four sides and as a symbol of hospitality and being open not just to people but also to messengers from God that could show up unexpectedly.
I don't see any problem.
Yeah, great symbolism. The problem is that they started showing up in Jewish weddings somewhere in Middle Ages.
Oh no.
So like 16th century.
Oh no, we're 1500 years off.
Yeah. So yeah, the weddings
right when that prayer started showing up.
It goes right there with that prayer. Yeah. So a little bit ahead of its time. Good symbol, but a little bit too early.
Oh no.
And in fact, the wedding
1500 years in a show though. It's come on.
That's right. And the weddings were actually like in two parts. So there was a betrothal where you promise the bride to the groom, and that one had like a ceremonial part to it. And then there was the actual wedding, and that was done like in a house, mostly inside. And it was all about consummation of marriage and future babies and all of that. So yeah, a little bit off there, just like a few centuries. So moving on.
It was really distracting when he drove up in a car too. That was really weird. I wasn't expecting.
Well, it goes right there with the ADA approved ramp.
Yeah.
So, next one. And that is the conversation between John the Baptist and Nicodemus. They start, John the baptizer gets into this, when he realizes, okay, Jesus is it, or things are happening.
He's freaking out.
He mentions this, you remember the words of prophet Agur, son of Jaki, and we were probably all like, where is that? None of those names sound like names in the Bible, the books of the Bible. It's not Jeremiah, it's not Isaiah, I don't know those names.
Yeah.
So he actually quotes from Proverbs chapter 30. Really awesome chapter. Like if you have nothing to read tonight and you want to read some Bible for your soul, read Proverbs chapter 30. Here's a little teaser. It starts with in verse 1. The man declares, I'm tired. God, I'm tired.
I hear that.
I'm exhausted. And then it goes, actually, I'm too stupid to be human.
Oh, yeah.
Without understanding. And it just goes downhill from there. So, I mean, I can relate to those words.
Yeah. It was written during pandemic quarantine.
Yeah. So the part that John the Baptist quotes, that has like, who has gone up to heaven and down, so kind of referring to God. And then that one verse where we were supposed to be all like, the answer is Jesus, you know.
Yeah.
The verse is, what is this person's name and the name of this person's child, if you know it. So the way it's in the episode, you're like, okay, he's talking about God, and now he brought the son, that means Jesus. But if you read the text in the Proverbs, it's not about God. It's about a human being. Like, which human being been up to the heaven and saw this, and whose son's done it? And it's a rhetorical question that anticipates the answer, no one. So it's back to that verse that I quoted, that I'm too stupid. So that
Zhenya, you're too careless with Torah.
No, I'm not.
That's what he says. That's what Nicodemus says.
Yeah, well, way too careless. So yeah, there is a lot of like playing there that like, this is not about God, this is not about Jesus. Anyway, can I do one more?
Which, by the way, wouldn't even be Torah if it's in Proverbs. It'd be the
Tanakh.
That's
right. Yeah, that would be not in Torah. That's in, let's see,
Nevi'im or Ketuvim.
Yeah, Nevi'im is prophet, so Ketuvim is the writings.
Yes, it'd be in the Ketuvim. Anyway, we lost everybody.
In Torah. And can I do one more, please?
Yes, you may. This is why everybody's here, Zhenya. Of course you can. I'm just being pulled behind your boat.
Oh, I can't wait for you to go into the wine conversation. You see, I'm leaving wine aside. I know you're gonna handle it. I'm not gonna try.
We're not gonna finish on time. I can tell you that.
Okay, so the last scene between Thomas and Raymar, I was like really listening carefully, because you see, I'm still struggling that Mary Magdalene is by herself, so she needs a girlfriend. Yeah. So I was like listening to their conversation, thinking, is this where this Raymar, even though we don't have a woman with that name, is that where she's gonna join? And the conversation is kind of like, I don't know. And by the way, I don't know if she does or not. But this is what Thomas says. He says, he invited me to follow him. But then he says, and he wants us to meet him. So help me here with English. He says, he invited me, and in that conversation, Jesus says, like, I invite you. He doesn't mention his, business partner. Yeah. But then he says, and he wants us to meet him, whatever, in Samaria. So is she inviting him?
It could be both. Yeah. So it could be us, meaning all the followers. So yeah, English is messy, and that's a messy sentence. Yeah, we have some pronoun wandering taking place there.
So if she does show up in the next episode, that is a woman that decided to follow Jesus uninvited. I love it. I don't know if it's or not, but I love it.
Yeah, Elizabeth was also frustrated that Rhema didn't have more. And she's like, "You're my freaking business partner. Like, don't just walk out on me. I need you. You're the guy who counts amphore. Like, I need you here." My nitpicking is, okay, the first one's related to wine, but I watch everything with subtitles on because I have 4 kids, so I have to watch every show with subtitles on so I can actually figure out what's going on, because fireworks are going off everywhere. When she's smashing the grapes with her feet, it says wine is running out. It's not wine. It's grape juice. Just had to say that. Second, my nitpick is a lot smaller, but when they're walking to go to the wedding, Jesus's backpack looks so nice. It's like a really legit leather. I'm a man who appreciates a leather bag. I'll appreciate a fine leather bag if I see one. That was a fine leather bag. I mean, it looks like I had metal grommets. It was really well done. If he went on Etsy, he'd be making a killing right now. Yeah. So just want to point out that was a very fine leather bag. And then the last one again, the nitpicking, to not have a conversation with these people who are are being left behind as these followers are just going. I think we need a little bit more there. We need more story there. We need more humanity there. The fact that it's two women that are just kind of like being left behind, I think leaves along some really obvious questions, which is, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? What does it mean for life? I mean, those, by the way, are real questions of discipleship. In 2020, if you're a non-religious couple and one of you gets religion, that's one of the scariest things that can happen. And in any loving couple, the other party is going to go, what does this mean for me? And so I think the show left out a lot in not getting into that. Okay.
Maybe there will be another disciple that will have to deal with that.
I think that's an important thing. All right. The next segment's deep dive. We go deep. I'm not even going to pretend that you guys care about this. This is for me, because this was an episode about wine.
I know. This is my time to just sit back.
I can't. It's already 8:36. You have to teach Bible study in 24 minutes. Or you have to teach prayer room in 24 minutes. We're in grave danger here. Everybody knows. For those of you who don't, my career before ministry was wine. And so any opportunity to just bring the knowledge that I have in the conversation, I can't resist. I'm like a dog with a bone. I just jump all over it. So the biggest thing that I want to highlight is maybe the differences or what wine would be like in their context versus the wine that we have in our everyday life. And so one of the most helpful things that happened in the course of that episode was when they were talking about the wine. One of the most helpful and unhelpful things were both in that one sentence. And it's when Rhema is talking about it. The first thing that she mentions is the vintage in which the wine takes place. And she says it was in the year Augustus died. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I didn't pull out my biblical history abacus to figure out how long that would be. Okay. While Zhenya is doing that, I can tell you two things. One, the vast majority of wines that have been created in the history of the world, which includes today, 99.99% of them do not improve with age. For most wines, the best they will ever taste is just a few short weeks or months after they're bottled, and it's declined from there. The only wines that improve with age are some of the most nuanced, complex, and expensive and particularly made wines on the face of the planet. So one, the idea that this wine's older, therefore it's better. 2,000 years ago with their technology, no way. However, one of the things that was very correct was they said, look at all the stuff we've added to it. Honey, pepper, etc. That's actually a practice they would have done because their wine was awful. And so that's why they would have done it. The people of Israel actually notoriously were terrible at making wine 2,000 years ago. And then in the 600, in the 7th century, that region was conquered by the Muslims who do not consume alcohol. They forbid that practice. And so a great percentage of the winemaking and historical knowledge of that region was completely wiped out. So we don't know a lot about Jewish winemaking practices. The best we can learn from is from modern day. If you want a modern day understanding of what their wines may kind of taste like, there's two possible directions we can go here. One is, oh my gosh, I'm going too far. So
keep going. I'm listening. I want to know.
In any red wine, the juice that comes out is clear. The juice that comes out of a red grape is exactly the same color of the juice that comes out of a white grape, with 3 small exceptions. And the way that the wine turns red is what's called maceration, which is where the juice actually sits with the skins and the stems floating around with it for an extended period of time. It pulls color out of the skins, and it pulls tannins. Tannins are those things that make your kind of like velvety, crushy feeling that you get in your mouth from red wine. That's what makes it turn red. So there's 2 schools of thought. One is their wine may have been crazy tannic, like crazy bitter and like dry on your mouth, because they're just kind of like leaving it, the must, which is what all those crushed up grapes are called, in that wine, which is why they then cut it with like honey and pepper and all this other kind of stuff, right? So if you want to try a really thick tannic wine that like gives you the best feel for that, what you would go do is buy a grape called Tannat, Tannat, that's probably going to be made in Uruguay. It's like the only Tannats you're going to be able to find in Central Market are going to be coming from Uruguay. That's where they grow it nowadays. And if you wanted to take that, cut it with a little bit of honey, maybe a little bit of pepper. You could and a little bit of water. You could recreate maybe some of what they had. The other school of thought. What'd you say?
I'm gonna pass.
Okay, pass. So the other school of thought is we currently have a lot of wine that has a lot of deep tradition that comes out of Lebanon and Greece right now. So if you're ever at a cool place and you see a Greek or a Lebanese wine, that might be a chance to try something a little bit more akin to what they have. Those, however, are going to be on the other end of the spectrum, and they're going to have a lot higher acidity. Acidity in a wine is like the fresh part of it. And so long story short, what they have is nothing like the Cabernet that you got because they were pouring out samples at Central Market. They were nothing like that fresh red blend for $12.99 that was in the wine aisle. What they had was very, very different. Probably acidic, probably pretty gross, probably also as a result of the natural yeast they were using, the lack of added sugars coming in, and their techniques. It was probably a lot lower in alcohol as well. Plus, they're cutting it. And so lower alcohol, very tannic, probably pretty sweet, and probably having lots of extra stuff in it just to make it palatable. So
okay. Now count like what would the years be for that wine? So Augustus died on August 19th, year 14.
Okay.
So if Jesus is about 30-ish.
-4, so you're 26, so it's 12 years old. It's disgusting at this point. It is worse than vinegar, and it's brown. 12-year-old wine from that region is impossible to palate.
Oh,
the grossest thing you've ever seen. So there you go. I guess that was nitpick. Things to know.
Wow.
Things to know. Sorry. All right.
Oh, back to that scene that, hey, this is not a crappy wine. Like maybe that was a miracle.
Maybe that's why. Maybe they had fresh wine from Jesus and they're like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. This is incredible.
Jesus provided Cabernet.
This is amazing. This is a $12 wine from the year 2020. It's the most unbelievable thing I've ever had in my entire life. So you're a deep dive, Zhenya. What do you want to dive deep on? We got 8 minutes left. We got to move.
Okay, so I want to speak briefly towards the money and what made Elizabeth uncomfortable. So once Simon and guys like him pack and leave, unless her brothers or her father takes her back and feeds her whatever
houses.
I mean, they have that house, so the taxes are involved. Unless the father or one of the brothers take care of her, she's in trouble. So she would lose everything and turn out to be a beggar or prostitute. So Elizabeth Hutch was very moving in the right direction. Also, another question is who would provide then for Jesus and his guys and feed them 2-3 times a day, unless they find some figs to eat, and then plus there's
unless you get tall James up in the tree.
Yeah. So who was providing all of that? Of course, there was a lot of they relied on hospitality, maybe even some sort of begging or people giving them money. The only place in the Gospels where we actually read about who gave Jesus money is in Luke 8, and it's women.
Yeah,
it is. So these are the women that traveled with Jesus: Mary Magdalene, Joanna, who was the wife of Herod's servant Chusa. So she was probably of higher status and had some resources. Susanna and many others who provided for them out of their resources. Yeah. So Jesus had some good female sponsors.
Absolutely.
Who were taking care of him and the disciples. Now, who provided for the families of the disciples? That remains a very serious question.
Very serious, especially because they would have been their marriage age and all those things. Yeah, raises some real hard to answer questions for us. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when we watch the show, we do so with the understanding, what can we take from this? What can we share? What can we proclaim as good news to a hurting world? What will preach? Zhenya, when you think about episode 5 and look back at the story, what do you think will preach? What do people need to hear more about?
Jesus talking to Thomas, and Thomas says, from the directions you provided, I see no logical solution to the problem. I can so relate to that. That's how my brain functions.
Yeah.
Like, I've got to have the plan. I've got to have an Excel sheet. I've got to have my budget lined up. Like, that is how you solve problems. And then Jesus's response is, it is going to be sometimes like this.
Bang.
That's it.
Oh man. That's so good to hear. I also cannot relate to that at all. Like,
okay, well, so what's your take?
I would never, I don't see like linearly at all. I don't understand how solutions come about. Like, I'm not an organized thinker at all. I'm like, I don't know, let's try this. Like, my solution's like, I don't know, maybe something will happen. Like, so mine.
But anyway, so for the population of people who think like me, that would preach. Everyone
absolutely.
else. What do you have?
And I need people like you in my life so desperately. So, what will preach to me is when Simon was talking to Eden about why he followed, and he said it's the way he looked at me. It's not just what he said to me, it's the way that he looked at me. And so much literally and metaphorically, what Jesus does is see people. Like, part of the good news that we have to proclaim is that Jesus actually sees you. Like, doesn't see the Instagram you, doesn't see the part of you that you see when you look in the mirror and you all you see are the things that aren't good enough in your opinion. Like, he actually sees the real you and calls it worthy and calls it good and invites you in to receive his love, to be a part of what he's doing. Like, Jesus actually sees you, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, and calls that good, even if you can't, especially when you can't, calls it worthy when you can't. That is just, that's what I need. That'll preach to me. So, all right. Our time has come to pack up. We've partied at the wedding. We're headed to Samaria. We're meeting Jesus in 12 days. On the road for the next 7 days before the next episode, Zhenya, we'll be thinking about the wow moments that stuck out to us. When we think back on episode 5, what made you say wow?
So the scene where Jesus dips his hand into that stone jar, picks it up, and what we see is trickling is Cabernet, kind of a wine,
Yeah.
Like that, in case anybody doubted, the miracle happened. And then he says, like, I'm ready. So to me, in that moment, I was like, wow, this was not really about water going into wine. Like, that is just like that's not what the whole thing is about. From Jesus's perspective, that was the beginning of the timeline, which he knows what is laying ahead of him. Like, that is what is on stake for him. And then also from the human world, I think the episode so in such a great detail showed us that, again, it was not about wine. It was the honor of the family. It was about all of those relationships that are already tense. It was about the business that was in danger, and how these two worlds meet together. And Jesus doesn't say, like, I don't really care about all of your little human details, because I have my own thing here that is much bigger than you. Like, for him, they both meet on the same level. Like, nothing is insignificant. Nothing is not important. Thomas's business is important. Rayma's business is important. The family relationships are important. And also, through all of that, Jesus's ministry, public ministry starts. So that was just so beautiful. And it was all done like in one short phrase, like when he says, I'm ready. And I just had to pause, and I was like, wow, like, I never thought about that story in that same way.
Yeah, my wow moment is tied directly to that, and it's the disciple whose name we can't remember. Let's call him Little James. But he was talking about being the stone worker, the mason, and he talked about the finality of that work. And he said, because once you start, that's the path you're on. Like once you start to cut, now you're underway. There's no going back. And that's what Jesus, exactly the same thing that you're saying. Like, this is it. Once you begin to manifest the presence of the divine, the Emmanuel, God with us, the coming of God's kingdom, the crashing of heaven into earth, the announcement of God's new thing, that leads inexorably to the salvation of the world and to the cross. And once you start to cut, there is no going back. And the way they made that scene go, where Jesus is working silently, but this metaphor is being proclaimed in the back. Thaddeus is what Carol's saying the name of the so when that come together, that was wow for me.
Yeah.
So friends, that's what we think. That's our something special. That's our something surprising. That's what we think you need to know. We want to hear from you in the comments here on Facebook. What's your wow moment? What do you think will preach? What's something that surprised you? Before you log out today, please make it a point to share something in the comments. What did you love? What did you have to see? And we got one more challenge for you. There are how many episodes left, Zhenya? 6, 7, 8. 3 episodes left. There's 3 episodes left. Friends, I have a challenge for you. Share this show with one person. Share the show with one person who you think would enjoy it, who's looking for something. Most of your friends are looking for some TV to watch right now. Share the show with them. Share the Chosen After Show with them. Invite them to be a part of this ongoing conversation, whether they're part of this church or any church, or especially if they're part of no church. Help them be a part of this journey and talk about it with them. Have this same conversation of reflecting on the show and what you saw with those your friends, the people you love. That's it for us today. We will be back next week with episode 6 of The Chosen. I'm Lance. That's Zhenya. Thank you for being here. We love you. We will see you again, same time, same place, for The Chosen After Show, episode 6.